You're listening to Parenting Our Future. I'm parenting expert Robbin McManne, author of The Yelling Cure and founder of Parenting for Connection. My podcast is all about providing you with the tools and solutions you need in all different areas of your parenting so you can create strong connections with your kids, get all the cooperation you want, and live a life that is full of joy and connection. And by the way, the tools and solutions that you're looking for in your parenting don't just live in each episode of my show, they're also in my free membership site, The Parent Toolbox, where you can access tools created by myself and my brilliant guests that cover everything from helping your kids to sleep, managing meltdowns, reducing overwhelm, to getting your kids to listen the first time, and so much more. Join the Parent Toolbox so you can download and use the tools that are ready on the site, and each week, a brand new tool is added. And of course, the best part is it's absolutely free to join and to stay in. You can go to www.parent-toolbox.com today. Now let's dive into this next episode of Parenting Our Future. Hello, everybody. It's Robbin McManne here, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of Parenting Our Future. And we're talking about something today that I haven't really addressed before, and that is really setting your kids up for success with their friendships. And what happens if your child has a friend that you don't like, or maybe they are being bullied, or maybe they're a bully? What do you do then? I am so happy to welcome expert Christina Furnival here today. And she is a wife. She's a mom of 2 kiddos. She's a licensed psychotherapist, a writer, and children's book author with over a decade of experience in the mental health field. She's also passionate about supporting parents and children to understand themselves better, navigate challenges with confidence, and live the life they want. She also has founded an internationally enjoyed blog called Real Life Mama after going through postpartum depression and anxiety to support other moms going through the same. And she's also the author of a book called The Not So Friendly Friend, which is really what we're here to talk about today. So Christina, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk about this with you today.
Oh, I'm so glad. You know, this is something I haven't really talked about. And I'm so happy to have somebody who can really help us navigate this, because I would say we don't really know how to teach this, right? Because I think when we want to teach our kids how to be friends, how to make friends with other kids, it might come from our own fear, right?
Wow.
Like, I don't want my kid to be alone. I don't want, whatever. So let's just sort of start at the beginning. How do you start coaching your kids to make friends, to be a good friend? Let's start there.
Right. Well, it all begins with social emotional skills.
Mm-hmm.
And what those are, in essence, is the ability to understand and relate to yourself and understand and relate to other people as well. And they are these skills that underscore basically self-regulation, self-control, the ability to think critically and problem solve, the ability to have empathy and to engage with other people in a healthy manner. We need these skills for going to school, for knowing how to stand in line or how to sit when we're supposed to sit. And we definitely need these skills when it comes to engaging with other people. And so as a parent, as soon as your children are born, a lot of us start reading stories or talking through what we're doing, kind of narrating our day. And that's the very, very beginning of setting the tone for those social emotional skills. And then as they get older, there's so many books on the topics about processing your emotions. What are emotions? And that's really where we want to put emphasis, because we want our children to recognize and identify what they're feeling, to be able to label and name those feelings, and then to be able to express what they want or need as a result.
Right. And so many of us weren't brought up with the language of feelings and needs. So that's why it's so difficult for us to really help them do that. Right. And so what I hear you saying is we need our kids to be able to say, actually, what I'm feeling is scared, instead of lashing out or, being dysregulated. And that's tough because our kids don't have a fully grown brain until they're in their mid to late 20s. Right. And so that's something that has to be cultivated over time. So how do you start naming those emotions if you don't know how to do that yourself yet?
if you're in a position where you don't have a great understanding of what you're feeling, that's definitely a harder place to start. Getting these sorts of books from the bookstore or online that do talk about feelings can help you along the way as well. Because I think if you ask people to name emotions, we usually get 4: happy, mad, sad, scared. Like those are the general 4 that everyone can very quickly name. But there are over 100. There are probably hundreds of feelings that you could look up in the dictionary and find names for. And I have this company called Bright Spots makes a feelings bingo game and a feelings matching game. And I really enjoy those. I used them in therapy when I worked with children, and I use them with my own kiddos. And they're fabulous because for the matching, you flip the cards. And when you find a set that matches, then you have that conversation. Oh, it's the jealous rat. What does jealous mean? When would we feel jealous? What does that feel like in your body? And that you kind of start those conversations to help your child grow that awareness, but also with you too. Because I realized even in playing that with my kiddos, I don't know how to describe X, Y, or Z feeling, to actually just to define what it is for them. And then I had to really work through myself. What's the best way to describe this feeling? How can I let them know what uncertain means? Okay, so maybe it's a feeling where you're just not sure, and you might feel a little nervous and scared, but you're curious too, and so you kind of try and put the words to it. And so games like that can be a great way to give you the tools to come up with the conversations about these skills.
Love that. So Bright Spots, that's very cool. I use Grok the World. Have you heard of Grok the World?
No.
Yeah. So they're rooted in nonviolent communication, and it's all about the communication of feelings and needs. And actually you can download from their free section, I think it is, a whole sheet of emotion words. And I actually use their sheet, and I give it to clients. I'll give it to anybody that, it's not mine to give, but I say, look, this is from Grok the World. They are incredible. And that's exactly what they're about too. So yes, I love that you brought that up, because look, we need some help. And I think what we also need to do is be aware of the words that we give to our girls versus the words we give to our boys, right? Because we sometimes give a cornucopia of words to our little girls, and our boys get mad, sad, glad, happy. What the 4 that you just mentioned, right? But our girls are like, oh, do you have butterflies in your tummy? Are you feeling nervous? Are you worried? And the boys were like, suck it up, get over it. And that's
be
not
tough.
okay. Yeah, be tough. And they have butterflies too.
They do. I remember I had a male client who was about 11 years old, and he came to me with his mom because he was having anger outbursts. And we were really working on him identifying when his anger was rising before it got to that peak point, so we could bring it back down into the green zone earlier. And he was getting really good at not having these outbursts. But then what was happening was he was starting to cry more, because he was taking the emotion of anger and it was being channeled into the actual true feelings that were underneath the anger.
Yeah.
He was finally feeling them. And his mom was actually more worried about the crying than she was about the anger, because I think anger often is more accepted with boys or males than it is with females, but also then crying and vulnerable feelings are not as accepted with males as they are with females. So it is something to pay attention to. If you notice, and like little girls, they might be strong voiced little girls, and you'll hear them be called bossy. And you're like, well, how about they're showing leadership skills? So we do need to watch our language. Our words are so powerful.
They are. And we often do label behavior in a negative way, and that doesn't serve us or our child, because that's how we see them now. And we don't see the gifts that come with being assertive. Like how great we've got a little girl who's assertive, who is a leader, right? That's bossy is not fair,
Right.
And also it doesn't often honor what's really happening inside. I had a client one time who, if you are my age, Little House on the Prairie, and there was a really good girl, Laura, and a really not good girl, Nellie, and her parents called her Nellie. And she said she was screaming inside, I'm Laura. So how horrible is that to be seen that way when you in your heart feel so different, to be that misunderstood?
Well, and that goes back to what you were just asking about. How do we help teach our kids these words? We need to pay attention to what we're saying. And a great way that we can help them develop the language to describe their inner process is by sportscasting or narrating what we see. Oh, you look like you're mad because your brother took your toy. But trying to be objective in our descriptions. So not putting judgment onto it. You were mad because your brother was being so mean. I mean, that might be what you witnessed, but the objective description is you were mad because your brother took your toy. And then that way they can understand, this is what happened, this is how I felt, and this is what I'm going to do about it now to help myself feel differently or process this feeling. And yeah, not putting judgment on it, on our descriptions of them and of the accounts that happen.
That's the key, right? Is no judgment. And I love that you said sportscaster. I'm totally going to steal that. I hope you don't mind, but I love that.
I love it. It's such
what
a great
I'm
way.
seeing here, everybody, is this Jaya. Yeah, I love it. Oh my God.
And he's running to second base. He's rounding the corner and
yeah, exactly. I love it. That's so great. Okay. So let's bring it back to our kids and their friends. So here's the question that I get a lot. I hear that my daughter plays with her friend and so I'm going to give you a bunch of different scenarios. Okay. My daughter seems to be really bossy. There's that word again, with her friends. What do I do?
Okay. So this first scenario, if you feel like your child is kind of steamrolling the play, then I not calling them bossy, obviously, number one, having a conversation with them and saying, hey, it looks like when you're playing with your friend that you're the one that is always deciding what's happening. And how would you feel if the shoe was on the other foot? How would you feel if your friend was trying to control all of the play? Well, I wouldn't like that. Okay, well, do you think your friend maybe doesn't like that you're controlling all of the play? Maybe. So what could we do about it? And you have a conversation about, okay, well, how can we weigh what you want and what they want? And maybe either figure out if we take turns in which game we play, or if we choose what you want first and then we choose what I want, or if you guys can combine your games into something that works for both of you, and really just help them understand that it's not just about what they want and need, although it's important for them to acknowledge that. And that's kind of the idea of setting boundaries. Is I feel like at some point we're so afraid of our kids being bossy that we silence their voice because we want them to be amenable to everyone else around. Yeah, then they don't learn to trust their own voice, right? And they don't learn to acknowledge and honor what they want and feel. So I think if your child is a leader in that way, that's so beautiful. And we want to harness that. But leaders consider everyone. They don't just consider themselves. Ooh. And so having those conversations, that sort of conversation, I think would be really helpful.
Oh, I like that. I like that. Leaders consider everyone, not just themselves. That's awesome. I love that. Okay. So what if your child is on the other end and you feel that they are kind of a doormat?
So this is where the idea of boundaries also plays, because we want them to have that voice. So at home, I want you guys to work on modeling self-love. And then I want you to applaud your children as well. So I think so many of us grow up with negative inner voices and very critical voices of ourselves. And that inner voice is often an outer voice, and our children see that. You know, if we make a mistake, they might hear us call ourselves an idiot or use a curse word or put ourselves down. And I want you to celebrate yourself, your efforts, your accomplishments, who you are. And I want you to do that with your child as well, because what they hear from us becomes their inner voice. And if we can really make their sense of self robust and strong and durable, then they will feel like what they have to say matters. And they will feel more comfortable to speak up and to not be a doormat in that way. On the other hand, some children have a temperament where they really don't care. Like they're happy to go along with what the friend says, and they don't want to have to come up with ideas themselves. So I think, like you mentioned before, projecting onto our kids, recognizing, is this okay with my kiddo? And is this just not okay with me? Then I need to handle myself. But if I can tell that my child's upset because they're not having a say, then how can I help them find their voice? And maybe the first few times you are the voice for them with their friend. Oh no, it looks like we're only doing what Sally wants to do. Can we make sure that we do what Becky wants to do too? Or after that, then you can guide your child before a play date. Hey, I know your friend sometimes steamrolls things, and I want you to practice saying, hey, can we do this instead? Or I'd like to do this. Maybe we could do that after, baby steps, right? And then at some point your child will develop more of that skill to be able to speak up for themselves on their own.
Oh, that's so great. And so true about the projection piece, right? That we sometimes feel our own stuff, or we feel it's really unfair, and checking in with your child, just having that conversation. Like, look, I see that they do that. Are you okay with it or not? And going from there, like, that's like, oh, right. That makes sense, and not just assuming, that and we're so quick to label good and bad, right? Oh, that's really bad, or that's really good. But it just is, and we've got to figure out how that fits, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so what if your child is facing a bully and is getting bullied, is getting made fun of for whatever reason? I mean, there doesn't have to be any rhyme or reason to why a child can be bullied. What do you do? What do you do if that's happening?
Well, like you just mentioned, we label things good and bad sometimes. And we do that with friends as well. Oh, you have such a good friend. They're your best friend. Oh, that's like a bad friend. But we don't always get specific about what that means. What does a good friend say or do? How do you feel after spending time with a good friend? What does someone who maybe is a not so friendly friend say or do? And how do you feel after spending time with them? And really help them gain that awareness about what healthy friendship is and is not. With that, that's power, because then if a child is mistreating them, whether it's an unkind friend or a bully, they're going to have an internal red flag wave that says like, hey, my parents talked about this with me and this person shouldn't be treating me this way. So that's kind of the first step, is really, what is bullying? So the definition is kind of technical, is a repetitive pattern of ill-intentioned behaviors, could be aggression, between two people where one person is acting that way towards another, and there's typically a power imbalance. For your children, we can describe it as someone is being mean on purpose, time and time again, right? Like over and over. And that makes it very clear to them as well. Is this person just sometimes not very nice, or is this person actually being a bully or engaging in bullying behaviors? And then you can also have the conversation about what to do about it. And most schools have programs in place these days, and they're a lot better than they used to be. Previously, it was a lot of, to the child who was engaging in bullying behavior, you're suspended, you're expelled, but there was no processing of what maybe is happening for that child.
Yeah.
And now they have, a lot of the programs have restorative justice. So they want to help the child who's bullying improve their empathy skills and understand the impact of what they're doing. And then for the child who's being bullied, it helps them feel protected and nurtured and secure and safe at school. So look up what your program is, talk to the principal or the school counselor and find that out. Who should my child go to if they're being bullied? So now your child knows what bullying is, what unkind behavior is, who they can talk to, what they can say, and know that the adults around them are going to keep them safe.
So I think it can be complicated and confusing too, because you can get in a situation where maybe the child doesn't want to say anything, doesn't want to speak up for fear of being even more bullied, or maybe now this child will bully my sister at school too. Or, what if I maybe believe a little bit of what this bully is saying? So I have two questions. What do you do then? And then what are some of the things to actually teach your child to say?
So if your child is being bullied or knows about someone being bullied, but you can tell they want to tell you, but they're nervous, and maybe they do tell you, but they tell you, don't tell anyone. I don't want to make this worse. That is actually a very, very common reason for not reporting bullying. With the school programs that there are now and their bullying prevention months, we're in October right now. I know this will air probably later on, but right now it's bullying prevention month. And a lot of schools have programs in place and kindness days to really let the students know what would happen if they reported and how reporting is the right thing to do. Okay. And as a parent, you want to relay that same sort of message, which is, you can trust me with this. And if I need to seek other support by letting your teacher, your school counselor, your principal know that I'm doing that, because it will help. I know what is going to happen. I'm your parent. My job is to keep you safe. Sometimes that means telling things that we maybe wanted to keep a secret. But it's my job to keep you safe. And the school also really knows what to do. So the more grown-ups we get involved, the more we're going to make sure this doesn't happen to you. This doesn't happen to your sister. As we have to breach that confidentiality sometimes in the sake of actually being more helpful than holding it all in.
Well, and I also think that what you said speaks to the fact that we need to have strong relationships with our kids so that they want to come to us, that they see us as figures of not just stability, but trustworthiness, and that we respect them so that they know that we won't go and ruin it for them, because that's real. They're spending a lot of time at school, and that could be really painful for them. Right. So I really like that you said that. And so what are some things to say to the bully to sort of neutralize the situation, if that's even possible.
It depends on, I think, the spectrum of what sort of bullying is happening.
Okay.
The Not So Friendly Friend, my book, talks to a very simple boundary with more of an unkind friend than with a bully per se. But what the character in my story says is, that's enough. I don't like how you're treating me. And since I have control over myself, I'm going to go play with the friends who make me feel good. However, when you're ready to treat me nice again, you're welcome to join. So it's this firm yet flexible boundary that says, I can protect myself, I can stand up for myself, and I can choose how I'm treated by others. And I can choose to put myself in situations that make me feel good. But it also leaves the door open to say, I'm not completely rejecting you. I'm not pushing you away. And I'm not saying that you're a terrible person. I'm saying your actions I'm not okay with. And when you're ready to change those actions, then we can engage with each other again. So if it's an unkind friend or a lower level bullying situation, that's a great way to handle it. If it's a bit more intense, a bit more frequent, if there's any physical aggression involved, speaking up and saying, you need to stop this is important, but also then you get the adults involved, because sometimes things are just too big for you to handle. And if it feels too big for you to handle, you need my help. And I hope that you come to me, and that will be the right choice so that I can really help you. So I think depending on your child's situation, their age, what's happening, kind of gauge it in that way. But the sooner they can get us involved, the better, I think, in general, because then also we can talk to other parents, or we can talk to the teachers and figure out what the protocol or policy is so that we're in line and aligned with everyone.
How do you talk to parents whose child is being bullied and their feelings about it? Because that's going to affect a parent too. They may feel rage, anger. They may feel so defensive of their child. They may feel scared, worried about school, feel sick when they're at work, or when their kids are away from them. How can you manage that as a parent?
That's so hard, because you put your children in school hoping that they're going to be safe and cared for and loved. And if you know that's not the environment that's happening, that feels really terrible. Having that communication with the school officials and making sure that there's a plan in place to support your child can help relieve some of that fear. They also can help to educate you on what they're going to do with the child who is bullying. So you feel like a plan is in place to not only minimize what is happening, but to stop it or prevent it from happening again. And I would say just to rely on those sorts of factors, but also it may be worthwhile having your child see a therapist so they can process what they're going through, you yourself as well. Because it's really easy. My daughter, for example, when she was in preschool, she got her finger slammed in a door and it actually cut off the tip of her finger. It was able to be sewed back on. So we're all okay. But the door was closed by another child. And even though it's completely accidental, there is that mama bear instinct of, who was it? I want to know, you know, I'm going to get them. But my husband and I had to be like, it's another child of the same age, and kids are learning every day just as much as we are learning how to be parents every day, and they're going to make mistakes. Now, bullying is that repetition where it's more intentional and more maybe filled with malice than being just unkind occasionally. So that's where it's hard, because you're like, why is this person targeting my child? But hopefully there's a system in place where you can utilize the supports. And there's also support groups you could find if you searched online for your area. And so much is virtual these days as well, because as a parent, you might want to talk with other parents that are going through the same thing and be able to process it as well.
Does it ever help to talk to the other parent of the air quotes, the bully, the child who's the bully? Or does that just cause more problems?
I know. I think if you guys are already family friends and there's a trust and communication there, and it's maybe more of the unkind friend situation, I think that's an okay thing to do, because then hopefully there's an understanding that both sets of parents want the best for their collective children. But if it's kind of an unknown commodity sort of situation where you don't really know the other parents, I think very unlikely will you have a positive outcome if you go straight to the other parents.
Yeah, I think everybody comes with lots of defensiveness because we're all mama bears, right?
Yes.
Okay, so let's say you're in a situation where your child is being bullied. You might be actively involved with the school and working on it, and so then your child comes home from school, and maybe you want to know, like, okay, how did today go? Were you bullied? Are we making progress? How do you broach the subject without being without bringing even more attention to it and making it a bigger deal.
Right. I think open-ended questions are always really good, and it, depending on your child, you'll know whether to go broader, more general, or more specific. And again, going back to what you were saying, just an atmosphere in your household of open communication and that strong connection from the start, because you know your child better than anyone. But I think, how was your day? How are things going? A month ago, you were dealing with bullying by so-and-so. Has that improved? Do you feel like it's going okay? Or does more need to be done? Depending on your kiddo. But I think checking in, we fear sometimes, even with like suicidality, we're afraid to ask, are you suicidal? Are you having thoughts of hurting yourself? But actually those really direct questions, research has shown they don't increase the odds that someone is then going to harm themselves or kill themselves. And in fact, being that direct helps this conversation begin to prevent it. So right. I think in the same way, if your child's being bullied, you don't want to be every conversation smothering them with bullying talk.
Yeah, exactly.
Where they can't escape the bullying and now they can't escape it at home either, the conversation about it.
Yeah.
But I think every once in a while checking in and being very direct, so-and-so was bullying you. Has that improved? Do you feel safe at school again? Are you enjoying school now? Are things better? And having that talk every once in a while, just touch points, I think can be really, really helpful.
Oh, I like that. That's really great. And you want to do the right thing, but we don't know how to do the right thing sometimes. So it just helps to know that. So in terms of this bullying subject, is there anything that I haven't asked you that you come up with a lot that is a big pain point for either the child or for the parent? Anything that I haven't asked you about?
One aspect of bullying that's relatively new, and it's something you and I wouldn't have encountered, is cyberbullying.
Of course.
And it's so prevalent, and it's heartbreaking, because you think about back when you got bullied in the schoolyard decades ago, you came home and it was your safe haven, right? You were exactly free of those people or that person. And nowadays, our children potentially have devices where they're connected to the World Wide Web and all the apps and programs that connect them to their peers at all hours of the day. And so if they leave school and come home, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're safe from certain people or certain groups of friends and whatever's happening. So I think in that case, as a kind of in the same way that you need to go tell the teachers if something's happening and you need to show your child you will protect them and you will take the steps necessary to do that, the same is true of cyber safety. You need to be having conversations around cyber safety. You need to be having conversations around and setting limits, ideally on phone, iPad, computer usage, as well as programs that are allowed and parent controls. I think it's our job to step in and make sure that we're doing what we can in those cases. That way, if they are experiencing a bully at school and the bully is following them on the internet and tracing them back to their house, and maybe they still haven't told us, but we've eliminated certain apps or the use of certain apps at certain times. Maybe the children aren't allowed to have their phone in their bedroom or something along those lines, where you're always aware or as aware as you can be. That's going to really help. I think back to when we had a computer in our house, it was in the family living room, so if you were on there, everyone could see what you were doing. And also, I think there was only AOL Instant Messenger at that time. There wasn't a whole lot you could do.
No.
But nowadays, these kids have their iPads and they put on their headsets and they're in a whole nother world. And so I think it's our job to really be checking in, because cyberbullying. So I think regular bullying, it's something about 20% of kids report it, but I think it's probably underreported. And cyberbullying, they're saying about 15%, but I have to think that's way more.
Oh, I would say it's way more too. Even just one-offs here and there, even my kids, I've seen stuff and I'm like, whoa, what was that about? Right. And so what I'll say is I have had some other episodes with some experts who talk about this, and I'll just mention those episode names in the show notes too, for people listening, because Wonderful. There are a lot of settings that you can change, apps you can use, different things like that will help you with your child. And I think the other part of this cyberbullying piece, and thank you for bringing it up, is that we also need to remember when we give our kids access, we are allowing others to access them. And that's so we've got to make sure that they're old enough and mature enough, and that we set those boundaries ahead of time. So we at least try to minimize what could happen, right? Because we don't want our kids to be hurt. And it can be pretty scary out there.
It can. And I'm going to go through your show notes for today's episode and find those things. My kids are just 5 and 3. So we're not even at that age yet. Although probably in the next few years, some of their friends are going to have cell phones. And my hope is that we avoid that until high school, but who knows how it'll really go by the time they're begging for it, you know?
I know. Well, I mean, they're talking about Instagram for kids, and I don't think that's necessary. We don't need to rush this. They're only kids for such a small amount of time, and they have lots of time for that. I did have the head of Instagram's head of safety and well-being on the show, and she did talk to me about all of the different things that they're doing. And there is in the Parent Toolbox a whole parent guide on how to make the app safer, how to talk to your kids about it, and that sort of thing, which is great. And of course, there has been some news lately on, Facebook and hate and, all of that, being what they sort of, what the algorithm promotes. So it's a difficult world out there. And I think we're all pioneers in this as parents and these kids, right? So we're all trying to figure it out. And it's no joke. Like, it's not easy to figure it all out. And I know we're all doing our best. So you can't beat yourself up either, because we're all learning this, and we're kind of up against, people and companies who know more about the way the brain works, who are kind of, trying to be a little more diabolical, and, you just don't know what you're up against necessarily.
Right. And some of those companies were profits, the bottom line, not consumer care.
Yeah. And that's what we've got it. We've just got to know that, and then make decisions based on knowing that.
Exactly.
And I talk, my kids are teens now, and, we do talk about that. I talk to them, sort of taking the line from Dr. Phil that, like, there are people in this world that every day they get up to hurt somebody. They get up and all they want to do is hurt somebody, and you've got to protect yourself. You've got to protect yourself. So that being said, I want to transition a little bit, because, sometimes we can be bullies with our kids, because we have expectations of our kids that we put on them to please others. So I want to talk a little bit about, how, so what I'm trying to say is, when we want them to perform in front of family, or we expect them to act a certain way, and they just can't do that. So can we talk a little bit about, what if your kids don't want to do what you want them to do? Like, we go to a family gathering, we go to a birthday party, and our kids, like, I remember my mom and dad wanted me to, like, kiss my aunt and uncle, who I didn't even know. And, like, everybody's standing watching me. And I'm like, you guys, like, in my head, I was like,
so much pressure.
Yeah. Like, why are you doing this to me? Like, it was my one thing I remember so clearly is my German uncle. I didn't even know him. And they wanted me to, like, kiss him. And he was, like, kind of scary looking. And, like, I just didn't want to. Right. Yeah. So how do we avoid that sort of trap of wanting our kids to, be so great with everybody, but also honoring who they are? And then the other side of it is the expectation maybe of the relatives. Like, why can't your kid hug me? Why can't my grandson or my granddaughter hug me? I don't understand. Right. So can we talk a little bit about that?
Yes. I'm really pleased, because I feel like we're in a day and age where, at least with the body autonomy, there's a lot more conversation around that. And the idea that more and more families are saying, go say goodbye to Uncle so-and-so, but you can wave, you can give an elbow, you can give a hug, whatever feels good to you. And I love that is now something that is being spoken about. I feel like even my aunts and uncles, they're a generation above me, they understand and have heard that. So they're not surprised when our children just wave from afar. They don't feel hurt. Or they don't put that hurt onto the child and expect the child to carry the weight of the adult's emotions. Like in our aunts and uncles and grandparents' generations, where that was much more normal, to have that expectation that you show your elders love and you do what your elders say. So I'm really glad that things around that are changing, but it is hard. I mean, I can attest, I've got 2 kids that are not rule followers at all, at all. And so my expectation of how I would be as a mom and how they would be as children, I've had to work this entire time, these full 5 years, on just accepting reality, you know, and who they are and how they're going to be. I do set up structure around situations to minimize conflict. So we went to a pumpkin patch the other day, and we went to a pumpkin patch that was fenced in. Both my kids are like flight risks always. They're just trying to run away. I don't know what they're doing. But so
I love that you admit it though. Thank you for not pretending that you're perfect. You know,
yes,
that my kids are perfect. Yeah, I love it. I love it. Okay, my kids don't follow rules. I love it. That's great.
They don't. They're incredibly intelligent, super inquisitive, exploratory kids. And so those are the positive terms, right, to describe their nature, which could also be described. Right. Yes. You know, the flip side could be disobedient, defiant, those sorts of terms. Bad. And sometimes I feel that way. Yeah, bad. Exactly. Sometimes I feel that way. And I'm like, oh, I wish my kids were more obedient. But at the same time, they are carving out their own path in the world. And so I structure situations in that way. Same thing. I only go to parks that are fenced in, because then I know there's a big physical barrier that will help prevent, it doesn't always stop their escape. I have had to chase my daughter when my son was at like 6 months old and he was sitting. He was at the age where he could sit. We were at the park and she found the one gate out and just bolted, and I had to like put him down on the sand and then just jump the fence and go chase her. So it doesn't always even work. But same thing in family situations. If you know your child's more shy, then you can set that expectation ahead of time. Hi, mom and dad. Hi, brother and sister. Just a reminder, my child feels more shy sometimes. Please don't force the issue. They will come over to you when they feel comfortable. And prepping them. And then with your child, also same thing. We have this projection of like, we want our kids to be these confident social creatures, but they're like little kids. And like you said, aunts and uncles can look scary. Adults can be intimidating. And if they don't want to go hug and kiss or even acknowledge, that feels not great, because we want our kids to be like these little perfect things, but who cares really? Like, is it really a problem? It's not. And the more you push your children, oftentimes then the more they dig in their heels. Whereas if you give them acceptance and love for who they are, then it's a springboard for them to feel comfortable now to try these different things. So I think setting up the structure, preparing the other adults, and then to some extent, just acknowledging that your kid will be a kid and they're going to jump on couches and they're going to spill food, and that's okay because they're kids.
Yeah. Well, and not expecting them to be some perfect children.
Like Van Trapp kids, you know?
Yeah. And that is also not personal, you know, like it doesn't mean they don't love you, grandma and grandpa, or auntie and uncle. It just means that they are facing something in themselves. And I remember, you know, with my two kids and then my brother and sister-in-law who we're really close with, they're two girls. So they've got their two kids, we've got our two kids. And, you know, my one son is outgoing and friendly and talkative. And then their oldest daughter, she just goes away and doesn't want to be bothered right away. She just needs some time to warm up. And it was very difficult to sort of, you know, coach the grandparents to not be like all over them, because it was like, hey, you guys, you know, like it was like, could you just chill? And they took that personally too, when we would say, like, could you just like kind of, you know, let them ease into it. So there can be that dynamic, and you just, you know, I think you just keep trying, you just keep communicating. It's not personal. You know, they really love you. They want to be with you, but you just got to give them a little bit of time. This is a new, this is a different house. There's different smells, you know, and sometimes people are drinking and they can get a little over aggressive and stuff like that too. And that's all of that is overwhelming for a child. So again, everything that you said makes perfect sense. And, you know, we all have different family, and you know, I've worked with clients that have said, well, it's so embarrassing because she won't do this or he won't do this. And it's like, well, you know, it just is, and we can explain it. Right. And it's not personal. So please don't take it personally.
Yeah. Exactly. And if you are feeling embarrassed, where do you think that's coming from? Why does that matter? What does it say about you if they're not doing X, Y, or Z? And what's the evidence underneath that? Or what does that mean about who you are? What does it mean about them? Where does that thought come from? And kind of really trying to break that down too, because so often it's just our own stuff and we put it onto our kiddos. And going back to what you were just saying about the grandparents coming in kind of intense, if their feelings are hurt because our child doesn't behave in the way that they want them to, I have compassion for them because that doesn't feel good, but you're also a grown up and you can handle your own emotions. I don't care really to some extent
Right.
if you're uncomfortable, because I'd rather have you grown up be uncomfortable than my 5-year-old
Right.
deal with discomfort because of you. Do you know what I
Right.
mean?
100%. Like, get over it, right? Like that's when it's okay to say get over it. And just
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and the fact of the matter is it will impact the relationship. So you do need to get over it, because
Right.
if you want a close relationship with your extended family, you have to honor who everybody is, and not everybody's going to come, exactly how you want them to. Right.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's so important. So so I think I love that we're talking about this, and I love that we've talked about boundaries, and let's maybe talk just for a minute about how to set up good boundaries for your kiddos. Like, what we've talked about, what does a good friend say or do, what does a unkind friend say or do. Is there any more to the boundary piece that you want to talk about? I mean, there's boundaries that we have with our kids, right, that we want to hold those boundaries and not sort of hold them 1 minute, not hold them the other minute, but what else is there on the topic of boundaries?
With our kids, going back to having conversations, this is another conversation that needs to be had if you want your child to be able to develop the skill a lot earlier than a lot of us did.
Yeah.
And with my book, The Not So Friendly Friend, a lot of the adults that read it are like, oh, where was this when I was a kid? Or I wish I was learning this before my 30s or 40s.
Right.
And so it's a fabulous tool. And at the back, it has conversation starters and discussion questions, which actually I've shared with you. So that'll be in your toolbox on the website. So whoever is following the podcast, you can see those right there. And download them. But having conversation about getting specific about what is a boundary. And so it's easy to describe a boundary in terms of maybe a physical barrier. So you can imagine a white picket fence around a yard. And that is a kind yet firm demonstration of this is my property that I'm in charge of, and this is not. And ideally, your fence will have a gate. And that gate says, yes, some people are allowed in here, but really probably only the people that I want to allow in here. And so that is a physical boundary. When it comes to interpersonal boundaries, and when you're trying to teach these to your kids, we can describe a boundary as a limit that you say. So you need to speak out loud and clear, I like or I don't like this or that you're doing to me or to other people. And then the final step of setting a boundary is actually upholding the boundary, like you just mentioned. If we set a boundary, but then when that boundary is crossed, we don't uphold it, that other person has learned that we don't actually mean what we say, and that they can step over our boundaries time and time again. And so we have to get comfortable setting, as a parent, we have to get comfortable modeling boundary setting, and then also encouraging our children to have that voice. And they might set boundaries with us. They might set boundaries with their siblings. And that is a little sticky because we kind of want these super obedient children, right? That just do what we say. Don't we all?
Yes.
But when they set boundaries, we need to respect that as well. So I know mealtime, my daughter is very particular about what she eats. She doesn't eat huge quantities. And so I want to just like shove food down her mouth. I'm like, you just need to eat. I want you healthy and robust. So eat. But if she's full, then I need to respect, okay, you're telling me that your stomach is full, and we're going to acknowledge that and honor that. And we're going to stop eating. And so having those sort like respecting their boundaries in that way.
If I can add on to that, is that when you have that boundary, and when you respect your child's boundary, if you don't, then you're going to make that food a bigger issue too, right? If you don't stop where the boundary is with your child, like, I respect that you're saying you're full and you really aren't asking for food later on, right? If you don't respect that, you're going to make food a big issue. You're going to make whatever it is a big issue, right? Because it's about you. You're uncomfortable with your child not eating enough, and it's not about you. It's about them. They're saying they're fine. Our kids will not starve, right? They will not starve. They consume their calories, over 24 hours, not just in each little meal segment. And, they get their nutrition really in the course of a week. And obviously that's just one situation, but when you really think about it, you've got to step out of yourself and say, okay, what is going on with me? What is the story I'm telling myself about that?
Absolutely. And then with modeling boundaries, we may not be that good at that either. We might not be that practiced. And so it feels uncomfortable, but you'll want to walk through what you're thinking. This helps your child make sense of your process so that they can make sense of their own as well. And so let's say, this is an example I give a lot, but you're at a restaurant and you order your food and the food that is delivered to you is not what you ordered. A lot of us people-pleasing folks might be like, oh, well, I'll just eat this, right? Like, I'm not going to do anything. It's fine. But if we want to encourage boundary setting and speaking up for ourselves, then we may say to our child, oh no, this isn't what I ordered. I'm sure the server would want to give me what I asked for, and I deserve to get what I asked for. So when they come back, I'll just let them know about the mistake so that they can fix it. And then you do that. And so that shows, oh, my mom or my dad or my caregiver values themselves and they speak up for themselves and they have power over their life experiences. And I think that's where boundaries are kind of your like superpower. I think they're magical. They give you agency over your life, and to give that gift to your children when they're young and help them have agency over their relationships, but also their life in general, because they can speak up for what they need. I think it's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah. And also showing them that you can hold a boundary with kindness, right? With love for them and for the person that brought you rice instead of the salad, that you really wanted, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and I think that's such a good point, because boundaries get a bad rap, right? They're like, oh, that I don't want to be mean, right? That's a thought. I just didn't want to speak up because I didn't want to be mean. I didn't want to hurt their feelings. Here's the deal. Boundaries are actually the most kind you could be. And it starts with kindness to yourself, but it's also kind to your relationship, because you're being authentic, you're being truthful, and you're giving the other person the opportunity to know the whole you. If you enter into a relationship where, for example, I have a couple of female clients in their 20s right now. And when they get into a romantic relationship, they have said to me, oh, I want to seem really cool. I want to seem very chill, so if he wants to go to the game with his friends and be gone for hours, I don't want to tell him I care, because I want him to think I'm super cool. But then the reality is they're stewing on these things that they haven't been honest about, haven't set boundaries about, and then they blow up. And so when they finally blow up, then that's certainly not being kind. And their partner is like, whoa, I thought you didn't care about these things. But so it's inauthentic to not come forward from the beginning with your honest self and give your relationship a chance to be totally open and honest. And if someone doesn't respect your boundaries, well, that's a lot of information, isn't it? And then you get to decide what you're going to do about it.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, so good. Thank you so much for all this information. I've loved every second talking to you. You are such a wealth of information. Thank you so much. In your book, The Not So Friendly Friend, where can people get that? Because it is a wonderful, wonderful book.
Thank you so much. I'll hold it up just in case anyone's looking on your YouTube or on your Facebook page. This is the book written by me, Christina Furnival, and illustrated by Katie Dwyer, published by Pessy. And you can find it on Amazon, on Barnes & Noble online, Target online, on the publisher's website. So that's pesi.com. And if you want a signed copy, you can go to christinafurnival.com/books and put in an order there.
Awesome. Okay. And so as we were ending on the whole boundary conversation, the reason why is because that is what you have for us in the Parent Toolbox. So you have conversation starters and discussion questions all on boundaries. So please, parents, take this from the Parent Toolbox, which of course, is www.parent-toolbox.com, totally free to join. And we've got so many beautiful tools and resources just to help you parent your kiddos in a more peaceful, intentional way so that you can have lifelong relationships with your kids as they grow and thrive in this, complicated world, confusing world. So I just want to say thank you so much, Christina, for sharing this with us and sharing all of your knowledge with us today. I am better for it, and I know parents will be better for it too. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This was so much fun, and I'm so happy to get to speak with you. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this edition of my podcast, Parenting Our Future. I'm parent coach Robbin McManne, and if you're enjoying this podcast, please share it with someone who you think might also need to hear this message. And don't forget to subscribe, and if you like my work, I would be grateful if you gave me a 5-star rating. For those of you who like my content and want more, visit me at yellingcurebook.com to get your copy of my book and to find other resources to help you. Until next time, I am wishing you and your family peace and connection.